stand-up and Park Ridge native Greg Glienna is the writer, director, and star of the original Meet the Parents, a film that inspired one of the biggest box office comedies of all time. The original 1992 film is back at the Pickwick Theatre for 1 week only, starting on September 20th. Greg, thanks so much for your time today.
Yeah, my pleasure. I think most people aren't aware that Meet the Parents was a remake. So after a long time of it being buried by Universal, I have some limited rights to show it. So I'm very excited about that, getting it out into the world.
And it's going to be streaming starting next year. Am I correct on that?
Well, that's the hope. We haven't finalized anything, but yeah, that's Universal willing.
Yeah. Well, that is a big crossing our fingers, but also we want to get people in the theaters. Let's talk a little bit. It's going to be at the Pickwick, but you have a strong connection because you worked there when you were a teenager.
I did. I worked there when I was 16, and the best memory I have of that was somebody threw up on me in the lobby. But
yeah.
No, that was my first job. Yeah, at the Pickwick Theatre.
Yeah, and it's wonderful too that like the owners, Dave and Dino, they are still such a big fan of not just the business, but also the employees there. And when they have creative projects, just always being receptive and opening to letting them show their projects or leaving it as a venue for that. So I just love that like employees who were there a lifetime ago can still come back and still find that place as a home.
Well, we actually showed the movie there 30 years ago at the Pickwick, so it's nice. I think that was the last place we had a showing, and then it disappeared. But
talk a little bit about that conversation with the owners of talking, that like, here's this movie that I made, was it, hey, can we show it? Did you bring it to them to watch it first? Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, he had seen it when it played. Dino had seen it when it played there back in the 90s, so he was a fan of the movie already. So yeah, he was all for doing a screening.
Talk a little bit about the inspiration for the script. Was it a particular family member, something that you were going through, something that you had just experienced, and you're like, oh, this is going to be a funny plot for a film?
Okay, what happened was I made a short film called The Vase, where I went to visit a girlfriend's parents and I break their prize vase. And I had become friends with the comedian Emo Phillips from opening up for him. And I told him I had this idea. He had seen The Vase on Image Union in Chicago. And I told him I had this idea for expanding it. He said, well, that could be funny. Why don't you write the script? And if I like it, I'll put some money into it. So I wrote the script with a Chicago writer named Mary Ruth Clark, and he liked it, and he put up the money, and that's how this got made. It's very indie film, actually. But then what happened was Steven Soderbergh saw it, and he called me up and said, this should be a big studio film. This is such a relatable thing for everyone. So we ended up selling the movie, and Universal has really kept it under wraps. They have not allowed us to show it anywhere, which I'm not sure why, but now is finally the time it's been enough years that I can show it in a limited way.
Let's talk a little about the history. So once the movie has premiered in 1992, obviously before we get to the 2000 remake of it, but tell us a little bit about that, because I heard Jim Carrey was one time attached to it, Steven Spielberg. I mean, tell us a little bit about, what that time was like, from the time that you showed it in 92 to the version that, we saw in 2000.
Well, we sold it to National Lampoon, and they put all these ads out, and then that fell through. Then we sold it to Universal, and yeah, it became kind of a joke with my friends. People, oh, that Meet the Parents movie coming, because it was just, yeah, Steven Spielberg was going to direct it, and Jim Carrey was going to star in it, and then we just kept hearing all these reports, and it was like, oh, it took 5 years from the sale to the movie coming out, and I don't think Universal ever really believed in it. That's what Jay Roach ended up directing it, and he told me that. He said, if DeNiro had passed, this movie never would have gotten made, because they just didn't see the potential in it.
But it's so related, because I think about Meet the Parents, I think about My Big Fat Greek Wedding, that like, no matter what your situation is like you've been that family, you've been that family member, you've gone through this, you've heard a friend or a family member tell you about something like this. So like, these are these stories that like everybody can relate to.
Right, but mine is a little bit darker than the remake.
I was going to ask you about that as well too. Some darker themes, some darker plot lines, and obviously, some of the things that happened within the film. Talk a little about creating that.
Well, I think we just knew because it was a lower budget that we could get away with a little bit more indie, a dark feel. But it's basically, it's the same movie but different.
Yeah.
I mean, they changed the dog to a cat and this to that, but it's there. I mean, it's all there. And I think people who are fans of the famous Meet the Parents will see it, will find it interesting to see where it came from.
When you were writing the script, was there a particular moment or a particular line or a particular scene that you're like, oh, this is something? Like, is there that moment that you were the hook that you're like, this is going to become something bigger than what I first imagined it to be?
I don't even remember. I remember we just had all these disasters listed, and we put them in the order of severity. But I never. When you're so close to it, when you're writing it, you never are sure if this is going to be, the big moment. But yeah, but there are some moments that get giant laughs with you, and I'm very proud. I don't want to give them away here, but yeah, there's some moments that I'm
basic. As far as shooting locations, because indie film, did you use your home? Did you use your neighborhood? Places in Chicago? You talk a little bit about some of the local spots that we're going to see in the film.
Yeah, it was in Park Ridge. The main house we used was a friend of my mother's who lived in town. She was like, "Oh, a movie, how fun!" And as soon as the crew moved in, I think she didn't know what she was getting into. We actually had to do some retakes about 2 weeks later, and she had painted the room, so we had to find another house for some retakes. But
that is awesome.
Most of it was shot in Park Ridge. There's actually a book coming out called The Meet the Parents Story, which I did not write, but I was interviewed for. And it's coming out in December, I think, from Bear Manor Press. But it tells the whole story of how this little film became $1 billion franchise.
Let's talk a little bit about this week. So you're going to be there on Friday the 20th. You're doing a Q&A introducing the film. Some other people from the original film are also going to be there. Tell us what's going on.
That's the plan. The Friday after the 7 o'clock show. Yeah. I'm excited to see it with an audience again.
Awesome. Well, Greg, thank you so much for your time today. The film is going to start playing at the Pickwick Theatre in Park Ridge starting September 20th for 1 week. Tickets at pickwicktheatre.com. And we'll see you at the theater very, very soon.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.